all familiar with the parable of the prodigal son. At least, we're all familiar with one part of it. We all remember how the younger brother in the parable demanded to receive his inheritance before his father died. And then he went off and squandered that inheritance on sinful living. And when he had nothing left, he humbly came back to his father's house. And instead of being punished for his selfishness, he was welcomed with a celebration. That's what we remember about this parable. And we all agree it's a good story. But is this parable really meant for everyone? Isn't it just meant for really big sinners who've done really terrible things? This can't be a parable meant just for really big sinners who do really terrible things, because Jesus told this parable to the Pharisees. And the Pharisees were the most faithful and religious people in ancient Israel. The very word Pharisee means separate, in the sense of set apart, superior to the others. The Pharisees were the good guys, the most perfect Jews. So why would Jesus tell them the parable about the prodigal son, about someone who was so far from being perfect? There are a lot of reasons, and some of them have an important, refreshing, inspiring message for us. This retreat guide, Father of Mercies, a Lenten retreat guide on the parable of the prodigal son, will explore that message. The first meditation will focus on the hidden hero of this parable, the father who shows mercy to both of his sons. The second meditation will look at the relationship between God's mercy and Christian joy. And the conference will look at some practical things we can all do to live and spread that joy more fully. Let's begin by turning our attention to God, who's already paying attention to us, and asking Him to bless this time we'll spend together for the glory of His name and the good of our souls. The parable of the prodigal son has three main characters, not just one. And in order to really understand the parable, we have to look at all three and see how they interact. There is a father and two sons. The younger son rebels against his father, demands to receive his inheritance right now, and abandons the family. The older son stays faithful to his father and to the family, at least in his outward behavior. He is responsible and dutiful, obediently helping his father take care of their estate. He seems to have it all together. But when his younger son repents of his sins and humbly returns home, asking for forgiveness, the older brother shows another side of his personality. Instead of happily welcoming the prodigal son and joining in the celebration, he stays aloof. He refuses to share the joy of his father and the rest of the household. In fact, he feels offended that there is a big celebration to welcome his brother home, because no one had ever organized a celebration for him, and he was the one who had stayed faithful. The younger son rebelled first, but the older son also rebelled. He just did it a little bit later on and for different reasons. Both sons rejected their father. And this is the first point that should make us pause and reflect. There are many different ways to put up obstacles to an intimate and trusting relationship with God. How do we tend to do it? Are we like the younger son, who rebels violently, so to speak, and goes off and sins in obvious ways? Biblical commentators point out the significance of where this type of outward rebellion led the younger son. In the end, he became a worker at a pig farm. For the Jews, pigs were unclean animals. Being reduced to working with pigs in order to earn barely enough to just keep surviving, then, is the lowest point imaginable for the people Jesus was speaking to. These sins of carnal pleasures and overindulgence had led this young man to lose his dignity, to become little better than the pigs he tended. That was the experience of the tax collectors and sinners who were gathering around Jesus to hear him preach, as St. Luke points out right before he inserts this parable in his gospel. When we fall into obvious and obviously destructive sins, like gluttony, envy, anger, lust, and sloth, we have the same experience. We actually feel that we are acting against our true dignity, our true identity as children of God, created in God's image, members of God's household. We can feel deeply ashamed and discouraged when we face up to these behaviors. The rebellion of the older son was very different. It wasn't obvious and shameful, it was much more subtle. Outwardly, he was obeying all the rules and doing his job on his father's estate. But inwardly, he had mixed motives. In a certain sense, he was trying to earn his father's approval and praise. And this comes out clearly in his reaction to the celebration that the father organizes when the younger brother comes home. Instead of joining that celebration, he stays outside, angry and resentful. And here's how he explains himself. "Look, all these years I served you, and not once did I disobey your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat to feast on with my friends. But when your son returns who swallowed up your property with prostitutes, for him you slaughter the fattened calf." With this complaint, the older brother reveals his heart. He shows that all his obedience and faithfulness flowed from a desire to earn his father's appreciation. And so, when he sees his father show abundant appreciation to the younger brother, who did absolutely nothing to earn it, he gets mad. Sometimes we do the same thing. Sometimes we live our relationship with God as if it were some kind of contest in which we could win holiness and happiness by performing better than other people. If you've ever fallen into this pattern, you know how fruitless it is. Instead of leading us to the joy and peace of greater intimacy with God, it leads us to a kind of spiritual anxiety. Our hearts, instead of expanding and overflowing with grace and love, become worried, constricted, and harsh. We can even start judging and condemning other people, and maybe even resenting God Himself. That's what happened to the older brother, and that's what was happening to the Pharisees, which is why Jesus was telling them this parable. Most of us can probably relate to both brothers. We've had our moments of obvious rebellion, and we've also had our seasons of more subtle rebellion. In both cases, the real root of the brother's sins can be traced back to a distorted idea of the father. Neither brother really understood the father's heart. And it was only through the father's reaction to their rebellions that they discovered it. Let's take a look at that reaction. In the first place, St. Luke describes how the father reacted when the younger son returns home. So he got up and went back to his father. While he was still a long way off, his father caught sight of him and was filled with compassion. He ran to his son, embraced him, and kissed him. What's most striking is the phrase, "While he was still a long way off, the father caught sight of him." This implies that the father was still looking for his son, still hoping for his return, still longing to be reunited with him. We can even picture the father going up onto his rooftop or balcony and gazing down the road his son had taken when he went away, yearning to see him again. Father never stopped loving his son. Even the son's insulting, violent rebellion couldn't obstruct that love. In a sense, the younger son really didn't deserve to be welcomed home, which is why he tells his father, "I have sinned against heaven and against you. I no longer deserve to be called your son." But the father didn't care about that. He dresses his son in the finest robe, puts a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet, all of which are symbols that the young man is being reinstated into his original place of honor in the family. This is a portrait of mercy. This is a father's love that is not calculating and conditional, but abundant, redeeming, and unstoppable. And the father's reaction to the older son's rebellion is similar. Here's how St. Luke describes it. "The older brother became angry And when he refused to enter the house, his father came out and pleaded with him. Once again, the father takes the initiative to reach out to his alienated son. He doesn't care that his son is acting selfishly and harshly. He goes out to meet him and to plead with him. And after hearing his son's complaint that no one had ever organized this kind of celebration for him, the father says to him, "My son, you are here with me always. Everything I have is yours." In other words, he tries to convince him that he doesn't need to earn his father's love and appreciation. In fact, nothing he could do could either win or lose that love. This encounter, too, like the one with the younger son, is a portrait of merciful of love that doesn't calculate and grudgingly measure itself out in little doses. It is abundant, redeeming, unstoppable. That is the Father's heart. And if either son had been able to recognize it, they could have avoided all their misery and suffering, all their dissatisfaction and resentment. They could have lived constantly in the joy of intimate union with their Father and of the prosperity of His household. The Father's heart in the parable is a portrait of God's heart, of the sacred heart of Jesus. Our God, too, is a Father of mercies. And Jesus tells us this parable in order to convince us of that. Will we let Him? Let's take some time now to read over St. Luke's narration of this amazing story and to listen to what God wants to say to each one of us through its inspired words. The questions after the biblical passage may help your meditation. gospel passage of the parable of the prodigal son occurs in the church's liturgy on the fourth Sunday of Lent. In the liturgical year, that Sunday is known as Laetare Sunday. The word laetare is Latin for rejoice. Halfway through our Lenten journey to Christ's passion and resurrection, the church invites us to rejoice, and it gives us this parable to help us do so. What is Christian joy? Joy in general is that feeling of contentment and satisfaction that we get whenever we come into possession of something good. Even simple material goods, like brownies and basketball championships, can give us a brief experience of joy. And that feeling of joy only lasts as long as we continue to possess the good thing. It goes away when we lose the good thing, or when it wears out, or when we get tired of it, in which case it is no longer good for us. Since all the good things of this earth wear out, and since we end up getting tired of them all, just think about how quickly we used to get tired of new toys from Christmas. No earthly joy can really last. They all disappear. But Christian joy is different. It is the possession of the one good thing that can fully satisfy our hearts, so we never get tired of it. It is the possession of the one good thing that doesn't change, so it can never wear out, never break, and never go away. What is this one good thing that makes Christian joy possible? It is God's mercy, His loving attention and unconditional, unlimited commitment to us. God is always paying attention to us. He simply can't stop thinking about each one of us. And since He is all-knowing and all-loving, while He's paying attention to us, He's also knowing us and loving us through and through, no matter what, whether we deserve it or not. His merciful love for us never wears out. It never stops, just like the father with his two sons in the parable of the prodigal son. That is precisely the good thing that our heart aches for more than anything else, because that's what it was made for, to be known and loved through and through, in spite of our weaknesses and failures, in spite of our woundedness and sins. So whenever we turn our attention to God, we can see Him with the eyes of faith, paying merciful attention to us, knowing and loving us without limits, and that fills us with the joy that never has to wear out. It's worthwhile reflecting on this connection between God's inexhaustible mercy and our potential to live with inextinguishable joy. If we can let this truth of our faith penetrate our minds and hearts, it can transform our entire outlook on life. We are loved personally, no matter what, at all times, without limits. So what could we possibly have to be afraid of or anxious about? One of my favorite church buildings illustrates this magnificent truth of our Christian faith. It was designed by Andrea Palladio, a great architect of the Italian Renaissance who lived and worked in Venice, Italy. Perhaps his most famous building is the Church of San Giorgio Maggiore. It is located on an island in the Venetian lagoon, facing the splendid center of the ancient city in St. Mark's Square. From the mouth of the Grand Canal, looking out into the ocean, you see rising before you the gleaming white limestone facade of Palladio's church. The interesting thing about this facade is how it changes colors with the seasons, the weather, even the different times of day. It's angled just right so that it almost always catches the rays of the sun. And it's perched right on the edge of the island so that the shimmering surface of the water reflects a second source of light up onto the facade. The pure white limestone, therefore, takes on many different hues. Sometimes it radiates a light blue, almost silver tint. Other times it gleams with an early morning pink or lavender sheen. Sometimes it shines brightly with the deep red of a Mediterranean sunset. But no matter the weather, no matter the color of the light, the strong, elegant lines of the church are always the same, consistently communicating the message of beauty, goodness, and hope in whatever hue the light happens to paint it. That's what Christian joy is like. The troubles of the world shine their various lights on us, but our friendship with Christ, firm and unshaken, turns them all into something beautiful. We are new creations, living temples filled with the unshakable love of an infinitely merciful Father. And so our joy doesn't come from fickle exterior circumstances, but from an internal reality of faith that never wavers. This is the everlasting joy of mercy. Most of us, if we're honest, have to admit that sometimes life's troubles tend to obscure our joy instead of giving it a chance to shine. If that's the case, we need to refresh our friendship with Christ, the source of Christian joy. And there's no better way to do that than to renew our experience of God's mercy, of His unbreakable love for us. For that, we may need to face up to the uncomfortable fact that we have not always been quite so unbreakably faithful to Him. We may need to ask for forgiveness and renew our commitment to be more faithful in the future. Since Christ's love for us is personal and total, even our small infidelities sadden Him. Whenever we ignore the teaching of His church, whenever we ignore the voice of conscience, whenever we fail to forgive, whenever we fail to love our neighbor as ourselves, we sadden our friend, Christ, who only wants what's best for us. We put distance between Him and us, just as the two sons in the parable put distance between themselves and the Father. That distance can suffocate our experience of Christian joy. There's an easy way for us to come back to the Father's house, to take that distance away and refresh our friendship with Christ. And it is something that we can do as many times as we need to. We can come to Him in the sacrament of confession, the sacrament of rediscovered joy. In the conference, we'll look a little bit at how each one of us can spread the joy of mercy. But for now, let's take a few moments in the silence of our hearts to turn our gaze towards God and see Him paying attention to us. Let's ask Him for a new experience of His goodness. Let's ask Him to convince us more than ever before that His merciful love can become for us an ever-flowing internal fountain of Christian joy. The following questions and quotations may help your meditation. deepest need of every human heart is to be loved and to love. And since sin damages love, only God's mercy given to us through Christ, who forgives sin at its very roots, can bring us the fulfillment that we long for and give us true joy. Here's how St. John Paul II put it in his very first encyclical letter. Man cannot live without love. He remains a being that is incomprehensible for himself. His life is senseless if love is not revealed to him, if he does not encounter love, if he does not experience it and make it his own, if he does not participate intimately in it. This, as has already been said, is why Christ the Redeemer fully reveals man to himself. If we may use the expression, this is the human dimension of the mystery of the redemption. In this dimension, man finds again the greatness, dignity, and value that belong to his humanity. In the mystery of the redemption, man becomes newly expressed and, in a way, is newly created. If you are watching this retreat guide, you have already experienced, to some extent, the redeeming power of God's merciful love. But think about all the people who haven't experienced it, who don't even know about it. Think about how different their lives would be if they knew, truly knew, that they are loved infinitely, mercifully, personally, everlastingly by their Creator and Redeemer. And think about how different the world would be if more people believed in and experienced that love. Think about how much more goodness, wisdom, peace, joy, and courage there would be. As Christians, one of our main missions in this world is to spread the good news of this merciful love, to help people experience it for the first time, or rediscover it if they've lost their way. And in another one of God's amazing providential gifts, the more we spread that good news, the fresher it stays in our own minds, the more fully we benefit from it ourselves. As Jesus said, there is more joy in giving than in receiving. St. Paul sums up this great mission that we all share in one short phrase. He writes to the Christians in Corinth to tell them, "So we are ambassadors for Christ, as if God were appealing through us." Ambassadors for Christ, messengers of God's redeeming and merciful love, bearers of the greatest gift that any human being can ever receive, the sure knowledge that they are loved with a limitless love no matter what. That's part of who we are as followers of Christ. God has sent us out into the world the way leaders of countries send out ambassadors to other countries, to be His representatives, His messengers. Christ has given each of us the power to speak in His name, to announce the good news of great joy, as the angels described it to the shepherds on Christmas night, to all the prodigal sons around us, wherever they may be found, at the office, at school, on our streets, in our own families. We have been entrusted with the message that the Father is waiting for them with open arms, that God's forgiveness is real, that life can have meaning and true, everlasting joy. Have you ever wondered how the parable of the prodigal son would have ended if the older brother had been a better brother? Let's think about that just for a minute. The younger son abandons his father. The father has to respect that. He can't force his son to love and trust him. He can't go out and try to force his son to come back home. He simply has to wait, hoping that the son will have a change of heart and return. But the older brother doesn't have to wait. He doesn't have to be passive. If he had really cared about his father and his little brother, instead of just caring about himself, he would have gone after him. He would have done more than just criticize and judge him. He would have at least made 1 or 2 trips to go and search for him. We can imagine the conversation they would have had if the older brother had found him at the pig farm. The older brother might have said something like, "We miss you, and we would love for you to come back." The younger brother might have answered, "But how can I, when what I did was so horrible?" "Don't worry," we can imagine the older brother saying. "Just come back. Trust me. We'll work it out. You don't have to stay here eating corn husks anymore." How much joy that simple effort, even if it had been unsuccessful, would have given his father. And how much of a help it might have been for his younger brother. And how much meaning and fulfillment it would have brought himself. Each one of us is surrounded by innumerable younger brothers who are lost and sorrowful. The world is full of so many people who have wandered far away from the Father's house and are miserable, not knowing where to turn, not knowing how to come back to their true dignity. It's not hard for us to open the eyes of our hearts to see them. How easy it would be to invite them back to the Father's house to experience God's mercy, and how much joy it would bring. To share the good news of God's mercy is really not so hard as we might think. I read an article about an incident that occurred a few years ago that illustrates just how easy it can be. Jim and Thomas were youth group members at a parish in the Midwest. They were chosen to deliver the prize, a food basket, to the winner of their parish Rosary Society's Lenten fundraising raffle. They called the phone number on the ticket 11 times. No answer. The raffle organizer suggested that they make another drawing, but Thomas wanted to keep trying. He and Jim decided to drive the food basket to the address on the raffle ticket. The address led them through the snowy streets to a run-down apartment building in the poorest side of the city. They climbed the stairs and knocked on the door. No answer. They knocked again. Still no answer. They waited, knocked again, waited some more. Finally, they got back in the car and started to drive away. But a strange feeling came over Jim, and he turned the car around. "We're going to try one more time," he said. Thomas didn't argue. This time their knock was answered by a young woman holding a tiny baby. She opened the door and invited them into the shabby apartment. They sat down on the worn-out sofa. As Jim explained the raffle, congratulated her, and presented her with the food basket, Thomas noticed that the apartment was filled with a funny smell. His eyes wandered over to the little kitchenette. He saw that the floor was wet. Then he saw a lighter near the sink and a gas can leaning against the wall. Just then, Jim finished his congratulations speech. Suddenly, the young woman held her baby very close and burst out crying. She pressed her head to her baby's and mumbled through her sobs, "I was going to do it. I thought nobody cared." Jim and Thomas, Christ's ambassadors, had showed her that God cared, simply by making an extra effort to deliver the food basket. God, in His providence, used that extra self-sacrificing effort to bring His infinite, merciful, redeeming love to a heart that had given up hope. We are all ambassadors for Christ. We've all received the mission to help spread the good news of Christ's limitless mercy, and in so doing, to help spread the transforming power of Christian joy. We're all called to visit the prodigal brothers whose lives intersect with ours. We're all called, now and then, to knock on a neighbor's door just one more time. In a sense, we're all called to be a manifestation of God's mercy to others. This is part of what it means to be ambassadors for Christ. In us, through our actions, words, and example, God wants others to be able to discover what we, at least in part, have already discovered and believe in, the infinite depths of His merciful love. That discovery will lead them into a friendship with Christ and spark an experience of Christian joy. This Lent, let's renew our commitment to fulfill this mission, to be ambassadors of Christ, consciously and actively. One easy way to do this is simply to go out of our way for someone every day this Lent, to give God's mercy a little more space to work in people's lives. We can go out of our way to help someone in little things, like giving up the better parking space, or taking time to actually find information for someone instead of just pointing them to the website, or, like Jim and Thomas, putting extra effort into fulfilling our normal duties. We can also go out of our way to help someone in bigger things, like taking the family to visit a sick relative in the hospital or the nursing home, or inviting the new family in the neighborhood over for a welcome dinner, or volunteering our most precious resource, time, to reach out to others in need. We can also go out of our way simply to listen to people, to take someone out for a cup of coffee and give them an open ear, to let them know that they really do matter. A conversation like that can so easily become a channel of grace. When we humbly go out of our way for someone, we can show forth God's goodness and mercy. If each one of us makes this resolution, during this Lenten season, God will be able to reach out through us to thousands of prodigal sons and daughters who may be afraid to come back to the Father's house, who may be thinking that nobody cares. Take some time now to prayerfully reflect on the 10 questions in the personal questionnaire, which are designed to help equip you to be a better and better ambassador of the joy of mercy.